I'm independent curator John Chaich, and you're watching The Artist Forum.
I'm embroidery artist Rebecca Levi, and you're watching The Artists Forum.
Welcome back to the Artists Forum. I am your host, Rebecca L. Hargrove, and joining me this evening from Queer Threads, I have their curator, John Chaich, and a featured artist, Rebecca Levi. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi. So tell us a little bit about Queer Threads.
Sure. Queer Threads is a project that started as an exhibition. In 2014, it debuted at the Leslie Lohman Museum here in Soho as a project featuring an intergenerational, international, intersectional mix of around 30 artists, all contemporary, who are remixing fibercraft traditions from crochet, sewing, needlepoint, embroidery, macrame, quilting, bobbin lace making, all to explore contemporary queer LGBTQ identity. So the exhibition debuted in 2014 and traveled to Baltimore to the Maryland Institute of Contemporary Art, and then next to the Boston Center for the Arts. And in that process evolved also into a coffee table book and many pop-up projects in between.
Wow. So how did you come around from being an exhibition to a book as well?
Through the good fortune of inviting the multi-talented multimedia inspiration, Todd Oldham, to lead a tour of the exhibition. So much of Todd's fashion was based in handmade details, and one of his most contemporary projects is the Craft Made Modern line. And I invited Todd to lead a tour, and which was enjoyable in itself. And a few months later, he said, you know, I think there's a book here. Would you want to collaborate? And it was an amazing project to work with his design team and publisher to bring, I hope, readers into the artist studios. I think of the coffee table book as kind of a studio visit with each of the artists where we show their work but also show them at work. And every artist is paired with an interviewer, different contemporary culture makers and thinkers, from Jonathan Adler, Tim Glenn, the choreographer Bill T. Jones interviews the artist Nick Cave. So it's been a joy to see a whole different conversation around contemporary queer theory, queer community, come out through the book.
So backing up to the exhibition, as a curator, how did that come about? Like, what was the brainchild that said we should bring these artists together and showcase them?
It was me. I work as an independent curator. I'm not associated with a particular institution. And, you know, some people play golf. This is what I love to do as a hobby. For me, it combines what I love in writing, in exhibition design, in working with visual art, in working with artists and relationships, and the variety of working with different spaces. And I had actually, in 2011, curated a show for visual aids that was all based in visual art using words and language and text, and which was an amazing experience. But for me personally, I was hungry to work with and explore art that was much more haptic and tactile and hands-on. And I grew up in a home where my mother and grandmother crocheted and quilted and always honored that work. And I also, as a young queer man, remember going to see the AIDS memorial quilt. Yes. And also was really inspired by kind of third wave feminism, taking back craft and Debbie Stoller's Stitch and Bitch Nation books. And that combination, kind of the moment was, I want to tap into why are so many queer artists drawn to working in fiber crafts and materials. And so over a course of from, say, 2011 till the exhibition debuted in 2014, submitting the proposal to, I wanted to present it at Leslie Lohman as this amazing space that's really the only museum in the world dedicated to presenting and collecting art by LGBTQ artists exclusively. Yeah. So it felt like the right home. And so there we fast forward to 2014 and getting to know just under 30 artists and presenting their work then.
Now, finding artists like Rebecca here, how did you all get connected to collaborate?
I think it was a referral. I think a friend of a friend said, you should see Rebecca's work. And even though we were both in New York, I don't think we knew each other at that time. And fell in love with Rebecca's work and selected, I tried to, every artist only had one work. So it was hard to choose just one, but we had one work in Queer Threads, but then we've continued to work when Rebecca had an exhibition of more work at the Bureau of General Services Queer Division bookstore here in Manhattan in the Lesbian Gay Center. We did a talk. So, and here we are a few years later.
Here we are. Now, Rebecca, you specialize predominantly in embroidery work.
That's right,
Can you give us a little more information about your pieces?
Sure. Well, my pieces, I used to be more of a pen and ink artist. And there was a moment, I had never, ever done embroidery or knitting, anything like it. It wasn't actually, my background was that I didn't grow up in it. I think my mother had rebelled against her mother by not getting into the domestic arts, as it were. So I didn't grow up with that tradition. And I was a pen and ink artist, and I happened to be decorating my apartment. And
as one does.
As one does.
One needs to.
And I saw a photo of an embroidered pillow, and I was very interested and intrigued by it. And I did not want to spend the money on it. And I kind of had this brainstorm that I would learn embroidery and create an embroidered pillow. So the first one I did was very decorative, but then I went back to my drawings and realized, oh, why don't I embroider my drawings? And that's how my practice as an embroiderer started.
Wow.
From zero.
From zero.
Yeah.
So you weren't trained, you're almost self-trained?
Yeah, and this was about 10 years ago now, and I think I started with a children's book, and there was, of course, great information on the internet, as there is now. There's even more, but at the time it was like on Blogger and Flickr, and finding an online community to learn from. So it was a very self-taught, but with kind of virtual support, as it were, and virtual community. It was a very long time before I found a community of fellow fiber artists, and I think that really wasn't until Queer Threads that I found like those fellow travelers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, can you tell me a little bit about your work that's featured in the book?
Sure. So I think the work in the book covers a few different series. The piece that was in Queer Threads, let's see, is called Two Ladies. And Two Ladies, I was doing a lot of my work is inspired by ephemera, especially queer ephemera. And by that I mean I collect material that might otherwise be lost. So at the time I was going to flea markets and buying pinups and obscure magazines and not so obscure magazines too. And this particular piece was based on a photograph I bought at one of the Chelsea flea markets.
So right here downtown?
Right here downtown. And it's also, now to me, it's a bit of a pre-gentrification memory too, because so many of those flea markets are gone. I mean, they're literally, 20, 30-story high-rises where those flea markets like the Antique Garage used to be, and all these wonderful places you could buy these kinds of source material. So the source material has it's harder to find.
Yes.
Wow. I love what you did too, similar to those flea markets being gone. This moment, this anonymous moment of these two ladies, which I always thought of as kind of non-traditional, kind of soft butch beauties, posing in the in this pinup shot. You're really cherishing and reimagining that memory, and so I think I was really drawn to that work for those reasons and beyond in your artistry.
Now, as a curator, what are you looking for? Is there a narrative, or you just find something that strikes you and you feel like that needs to be showcased?
For me, I may have some themes in mind that I want to section the exhibition around. But a lot of that may evolve, though, based on the works I then discover. Maybe the work I thought I wanted from an artist isn't. There's one that I didn't know about that I'm even more turned on by. There's the reality in terms of the art you want and the art you can get as well. In terms of if an artist is lucky, their work is circulating, or maybe we just can't get that piece shipped from Cape Town to New York. But actually, one of the wonderful things about fiber art is it actually can be very efficient and light to ship. So we've had the great fortune of having pieces from Buenos Aires and Cape Town, our neighbors up north in Canada as well. But to me, I do think of the way these works will feel and communicate in the space together. How the dialogue created between the works. I aim to create a space in which there's a variety of interactions. In Queer Threads, you found everything from a life-size men's locker room, completely crocheted and knit, immersive as you walk into a room.
I did not realize that was crochet, by the way. I had to zoom in. I was like, whoa!
So it works as immersive and yet detailed.
Very.
And I want to also create the extreme interaction of something that's intimate, focusing on a 10-inch embroidery hoop. And so that's one of the things I look for in curating as well, is what's that emotional experience you'll be engaged in the space through the variety of and scale of work.
Now, what's the difference between, because you said you're an independent curator, what separates you from, say, a curator from a large institution? I mean, what's the difference between having to source material, if there is any?
Well, I think for me, it comes with freedom, because I'm developing these ideas based around my own curiosity and passion for the work, and seeing if an institution will feel the same way when I submit the proposal. Of course, that could come with disappointment if they don't like it, but it also means I'm not responsible for an institution's collection and merely archiving or recontextualizing and maintaining that collection's work kind of in the canon. So I think there's a great freedom and play in discovering work that because I want to, and I want to celebrate it, not because it must be shown. And for me, I hope something I've been consistent with is showing a mix of emerging and established artists, work that's refined and fully polished next to work that's still a little scrappy, to create kind of, to show all those forms of expression and experiences.
Wow, okay. That's a lot, and it sounds like it's freeing too, though, because you can move, I think, through your own exploration of artists and what pieces you find a connection to in creating a narrative, and I think that's amazing. And
the narrative that is there at the beginning of the exhibition may be completely different by the end too, and that so much comes from dialogues with the artist, or like tonight, where throughout all the exhibitions we've had opportunities for the artists to talk directly in their work with with their work, in front of their work, with the small audience, and with each other. I think the subtitle of Queer Threads is Crafting Identity and Community, and even for me, a sense of community has truly grown through interacting with this family of artists and pushing each other and supporting each other as well.
Now, Rebecca, you mentioned that you didn't really have a community starting out, and that Queer Threads was a great community to be a part of. Has that informed your work in any way?
Absolutely. Actually, it's funny, as John said, there were so many opportunities to speak and give tours and watch other artists give tours, and spending a lot of time in the space. I think more so than any other group show I've been in, we really did have an opportunity to get to know each other and to get really familiar with each other's art. One of the pieces that's in this book is a flower beard I did.
I love that.
So it's a portrait of somebody that I know, where I created a beard of flowers for him, and that idea is actually from an internet meme. So I went from, collecting ephemera from flea markets to an idea from the internet. But where this connects back to the community of artists in Queer Threads is that I've started to do portraits of more than one of the artists in Queer Threads.
She hasn't asked me yet.
Yet.
Yeah. So there's this sense of of really communicate, like it's a full circle sort of being inspired by community, and in essence also giving back, and with admiration to other artists as well.
Wow. Yeah, I particularly love this one, and I love the colors and the variety of flowers. I think this was probably the first one when I went looking for your work that I came across.
And variety of stitches.
Yes.
And techniques.
Yeah.
How long does it take for you to create something like this?
They're they take a lot of time, and I keep on meaning to actually time it at some point, because it is probably the #1 question people ask embroiderers, I think.
Yeah.
And for good reason. It's intriguing, but I don't know.
You don't know.
Yeah.
But it wasn't in one day.
Was not in one day. It is not in one day.
It's like the Queer Threads game show. We'll have a buzzer for
right,
timing who's embroidering.
Work is very informed by actually comics, like underground cartoonists and comics.
Wow.
I think there's maybe an inherent narrative in my pieces to a certain extent, but that kind of line drawing inspiration and even printmaking inspiration and also portrait photography are some of the influences that come into my portrait work.
I think that Rebecca's use of kind of thread and needle as pen and ink is something that was very inspiring to me as well, and something that I would consider kind of one of the queer approaches to these working in this fibercraft tradition. There's some of the artists in the book and project are fully executing queer content using fully crochet and traditional techniques, but featuring queer subject matter. And then I think there's a kind of queering of those and remixing of those techniques as well, where it's a drawing with thread, it's a painting with cloth or felt. And that's fascinating to me and inspiring.
Yeah. I think with Two Ladies and some of my earlier work as well, I think because I was coming from illustration, and I'm not a printmaker, but I have like knowledge of that and admiration of that format, I would limit my color palette almost as if I was making a screen print, where you would only use like 1 to 3 colors. And of course, thread is very inexpensive. It's very accessible. It's not hard to do a piece with lots of different colors, but I was keeping it within a very specific color scheme, I think an homage or an artificial constraint to just limit the palette and see where that would be.
A wonderful connection, though, between those mediums. And kind of in contrast to that, there's an artist in the book, Maria Piñeras. I think of how she talks in the book about, because her background's in painting, she will mix strands of embroidery floss the way she used to mix paint to achieve the color she needs. So many of the artists in Queer Threads are trained more or have worked more in painting, drawing, performance, sculpture, and are drawn to the qualities that fiber and thread can bring out in new ways in their work, and I love that too. It's a mix of self-taught. There's also artists who have gone through graduate programs in fiber and material studies.
I was just about to ask you, for at least, well, you're saying there's a mix, so not everyone has to have an MFA, which I'm learning tonight, to be an artist and to express themselves in these mediums. What is next for Queer Threads?
The book is now in its second print run. It actually we launched it just around this time last May, and thrilled that a year later we're in our second print run and hopefully doing more pop-up exhibitions, small artist talks across the country, and we're also in initial discussions to kind of look at Queer Threads 6 years later, a kind of Queer Threads revisited in 2020 with a university gallery, which I'm excited about to kind of re-curate the show around core work. But there's an amazing range of artists, queer artists and beyond around the world working in fiber. It's really, I think, a medium that inspires and attracts creativity, and I'm excited to bring in new artists and explore new questions.
I was just about to ask you if you were going to bring in new artists.
I hope so, particularly globally, politically. I'm curious about the intersection of crafting and performance, kind of performing queer threads, threads in the body.
Do you think Queer Threads, the book, could evolve into a series of table books?
Talk to the publisher.
Okay, publisher. We want
I
a
hope
series.
so. We've had an amazing relationship with Ammo Books as a small art press to produce this as a labor of love for all the collaborators, publisher included, and we're thrilled that it's had a second print run and hopefully will continue. I'd love to do a series or, the expanded edition or even mini versions focusing on certain angles or cultures.
I think that would be amazing. But before I let you guys go, I know we have a lot of emerging artists that are our viewers for this show. And would either one of you have any advice you could say to emerging artists or curators or about self-education or exploration in the art form?
Sure, I'd love to jump in on that. Yes, absolutely. I think that there's so much you can do to be a self-taught artist, or to complement it or supplement it with doing self-formed artist workshops. Get 3 friends together on a regular basis and have a drawing night or a knitting night or embroidery night, or I want to learn something new night. Or just learn something from a book that you find in the library or the bookstore. Just speaking as an embroiderer, there are 3 basic stitches. There's many stitches, but you could actually teach yourself 1 stitch and just go with that stitch for a year, 2 years, 3 years, or the rest of your life. Literally, it's something you could learn in 5 minutes. And in terms of the material cost, embroidery is so inexpensive. It's thread, a needle, a hoop, and any fabric. So it's super accessible. And you can draw anything you want on a piece of fabric and just give it a whirl.
Do you have any advice?
My advice would be don't be afraid to go for it, or whether it's reaching out to a curator who you want to work with, or for me, you know, that was reaching out to artists that I wanted to connect with. We're able to do so through Instagram, through Facebook. You know, message Queer Threads on Instagram or Facebook, tag us, connect. You know, we're and I think more than ever, people in our creative world are responsive and want to collaborate and connect through Instagram, Facebook.
Okay, and do you have a website as well?
No, but you can find the book at ammobooks.com, where they have some gorgeous spreads of some more of the work.
Awesome. And do you also have a way that our viewers could connect with you and your artwork?
Absolutely. Rebecca Levi Art on Instagram is the best way to see what the latest and greatest is and to connect socially. And I have a website as well with a more longitudinal view of my work, RebeccaLevi.com with an Rebecca Levi with an I.
With an I, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm Rebecca L. Hargrove, and I want to thank you so much for tuning in. Please learn more about Queer Threads on their social media platforms, and also visit Rebecca Levi's website and her social platforms to connect. Thank you again for joining us this evening. This is The Artist Forum, and I'm your host, Rebecca L. Hargrove. The Artists Forum.
Get connected.
Be heard.
The Artists Forum is a place where artists of all disciplines can network, collaborate, and showcase their work. You want to know when to catch us? Well, check us out on Facebook and Twitter, or sign up for our newsletter. You can also see us live on the web via Manhattan Neighborhood Network's MNN.org.
On the Artists Forum, you'll see interviews with New York City's emerging talents in theater, dance, music, visual arts, as well as the written word. We'll jump the velvet rope to get interviews with entertainment industry's top insiders, as well as some of its underground talents.
Expose yourself to the Artists Forum. Show us your work. Invite us to your performances. Do you have questions about the business? Do you need help better focusing your career? Or maybe just want to post some information about an upcoming project? Well, log on to our website, theartistsforum.org.
The Artists Forum, on the pulse of community activities and events.